Good morning, and welcome to First Parish Brewster. We are a Unitarian, Universalist, welcoming congregation of people of diverse philosophies and beliefs, people of various cultures and races, sexual orientations, gender orientations, abilities, socioeconomic backgrounds. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your path, may this be a place of rest and restoration on your journey. I'm Twinks Hastings, happy to be welcoming you to the service today with our interim music director, Kaisa Fern, our worship associate, Elenita Muniz, our fabulous youth dancer extraordinaire, Lillian, and our guest, Time for All Ages storyteller, Kenton Hill. Our services are recorded and available on our YouTube channel midweek. We do ask that all over the age of 4 mask while in our service. Please silence your cell phones. We also ask that you wear your name tags or fill out a sticker name tag in an effort to be more welcoming to each other. We welcome and celebrate the noises, movements, and mirth that little ones bring to our services. Our services are 60 to 75 minutes long. We do expect some people arriving at 10 of 11 with the time change, so we're gonna welcome them in when they arrive. If you need to leave before then, you're welcome to use the doors at the rear of the sanctuary. For those of you who may be first-time visitors this morning, welcome. Are there any visitors who would like to introduce themselves? Any brave, vulnerable visitors? All right, well, welcome. If you'd like to learn more about First Parish, please fill out a welcome card, and they're in the pew in front of you, and place it in the offertory basket. Welcome on this morning, which we make sacred by our presence together. A big welcome to people streaming. We are glad you're here. And in the spirit of vulnerability, will you please turn and greet your neighbor? We haven't done this in a while. I just thought we would add it in. We're going to be vulnerable. What's exciting about these conversations is that you can finish them up in coffee hour after the service. In community news announcements, are you interested in becoming a member of FPBUU? The membership book will be available for signing during coffee hour at the table in the back of the parish room. The table will be staffed by membership committee members Joan Sullivan and Christine Jenkins. Where are they? There you go, so you can find them if you'd like to become a member. Reverend Jessica is now on parental leave and will return on annual meeting Sunday, June 11th. Rev Ken Hurto is the leave minister for Rev Jessica while she's on parental leave. Rev Ken will begin on April 1st and continue through the end of Rev Jessica's leave. Rev Hurto will lead worship 3 times per month and will be supported by our worship associates. He will provide up to 6 hours a month of pastoral contact as well as emergency pastoral care. Tavia and Barry Powers, 2 of the 3 members of the exec team, where Barry and Tavia. There's Tavia, Barry will be here shortly, who have been formed to support staff during this time, are available during coffee hour if you would like to have more information about our leave ministry coverage. Okay, we're nearly there. On Tuesday, March 28th from 5 to 7 p.m., we're excited to be hosting Zachary Hunter from the American Heart Association, who will be offering CPR training. You have the option to do the training without certification or with official certification. Spaces are limited and on a first-come basis. 436,000 people die in the USA alone every year from sudden cardiac arrest, and CPR, if administered immediately, can double or triple a person's chance of survival. I'm a huge advocate of everyone having CPR skills, and wildly, since living on Cape Cod, I've used mine twice. So please consider this life-saving opportunity. And please don't forget to submit your pledges if you haven't done for this year's annual campaign. And finally, today is an auspicious day because there's someone in this room who was born 102 years ago. And if you were born 102 years ago, you deserve a celebration. Nancy, will you join me up front for a moment? I think you all know this song.
Let's see, the birthday was actually on March 9th. And ever since then, people from this parish have treated me beautifully with all your love and consideration and so forth. Whoops. I do thank you so much, Mrs. Merriwell. And we'll hang in here and see how well it goes. Bless you one and all.
We'll celebrate you next year, Nancy. Following the service today, everyone is invited to the parish room for masks, optional coffee hour and conversation, and you're welcome to socialize in the sanctuary with masks on. Welcome to our service today. It is so good to be together.
There is nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here. No right beliefs or proof of citizenship. No eternal optimism or clarity of conviction. No boundless courage or endless expertise. You do not need to know what brought you here, or how you will solve that problem that you are turning over and over and over in your mind. Your bills do not need to be paid, and your checkbook can be a mess. Your children may have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not be working, and your knees may be creaking. You do not need to be perfect or even halfway to belong in this circle where grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us as it found us, where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us and this day anew once again. Come, let us worship together.
Okay, I'm going to invite you into a little vulnerability in the way of boogieing. You can take your insert. There are some boogiers here. And you all, I invite you to stand, rise, in body or spirit. And I'm just going to teach you a couple of lines. It's a really repetitive song. I'll just teach you the part that goes, we're all in this together. Once we know that we're all stars and we see that. Let's try it. We're all in this together. Once we know that we're all stars and we see that. And all the rest of those lines go just like that, but different words that you have. And then the beginning part, together, 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 everyone. Let's hear you. Together, 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 everyone. Together, together, come on, let's have some fun. Together, together, come on, let's have some fun. Okay, now the moves. You see, it's all with one hand if you want. And so we're going to go for the first part, you just boogie. And then when we go, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. Once we, okay, 4 of those. Then, that's always what you're going to do for we're all in this together. 4 back and forths. And then we got the stars, when we're talking about stars. Then, when we stand hand in hand, like you're holding somebody's hand. Then when we reach, we can fly, no inside. And then once we see there's a chance that we have, and we take it. You'll follow. I mean, we got all of this right here. I think we're ready. Freestyle dancing. Together, 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 everyone. Together, together, come on, let's have some fun. Together, we're there for each other every time. Together, together, come on, let's do this right. Here and now, it's time for celebration. I find
That looked amazing.
Okay, now, excuse me. I should have practiced up for that one. Okay, we're going to do our affirmation. And let's do it as a call and response. So let's have this side do the first line and this side do the response. Okay? See what I'm doing. Okay. We believe in love. Love is the doctrine of this church. We believe in truth. The quest for truth is our sacrament. We believe in helping others, and service is our prayer. We believe in the sacredness of life to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thank you.
I'm going to ask our children and youth to join us up front. Good morning, everybody. This is my friend Ken, and he's going to tell our story today. He has written so many books, and he's really cool. So I think you're going to like this.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Are we good? Better? I can talk louder too. If I need it. Help has arrived. There we go. Better? Okay, good. All right. So, good morning. It's good to be here. I have a question for you all. How many of you like to tell stories and draw pictures? Yeah? Okay, I do too. And as Spink said, I've written several of them. I'm going to talk to you about one of them today. I have another question. How many of you like to watch birds? Have any birders? Yeah? Oh, man. Lots of bird watchers. Well, I like to do that too. Do you have any favorite birds? What's your favorite?
My favorite is a blue robin.
Blue robin. And your favorite?
My favorite actually it's a blue jay. A wagon robin.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite?
Cardinal.
Oh, yes, cardinal. Does anybody like to watch hummingbirds? Well, I was watching a hummingbird one day, and I thought, I can write a story about that. So I could put the two things together, write a story, draw some pictures, and watch some birds. And that's what my story is about today. I call it Bird Buddies. And it's about watching. And the story begins with Rosa and her friend Boone, and they decide that they want to watch and check out some hummingbirds. So they go out together and they watch very carefully. They use the binoculars and see everything they can see. And as they do that, they jot down the things that they see the hummingbirds doing. So they have this whole list of all the things, like hovering like a helicopter, poking skinny beak into flowers, catching tiny bugs in midair, and how they fly fast, back and forth, up and down, even upside down. So they made this list of all the things that they saw the hummingbirds do. And then they thought they would like to share that list with Rosa's aunt. Rosa's aunt is an ornithologist. Does anybody know what an ornithologist is? Any ideas? An ornithologist is a scientist who studies birds. So they thought she would be interested in what they had learned about the hummingbirds. So they took the list and she looked at it and she says, this is impressive. You guys are really learning a lot about hummingbirds. So then they got excited about going out and learning some more. But before they left, they walked past a parrot. Aunt Olivia had rescued a parrot. And so they got to thinking, I wonder if a parrot and a hummingbird could be friends. And then they heard the parrot say, that's a good question. Well, and that is a good, how many of you think a parrot and a hummingbird could be friends? Yeah? Okay, well that was intriguing to Rosa. She thought, I think I'll write a story about that. Because she likes to write stories and draw pictures too. So that's what they did. She went home, and the next few days she wrote a story about Hector the hummingbird and Penda the parrot. And it starts by Hector is flying by the window of an ornithologist. And through the window, Hector hears, "Want a cracker?" And Hector went, "Mm-mm, mm-mm." And then he hovered and waited. And then he heard, "Want a red flower?" "Ah, yes." Ooh, he goes, "Mm-hmm, mm-hmm." And he flew in the window and he landed on the cage where the parrot was staying. And they just looked at each other for a little bit. And that word vulnerability, they felt a little vulnerable, a little afraid, kind of anxious, because that other character was much different than them. How is this going to work out? They just sat and looked at each other for a while. And then Hector looked around and he didn't see any red flowers. So he wondered, what's going on? And then he heard Penda say, "Red flower outside." Then Hector knew he was going to have to open the cage and let Penda out of the cage so they could go fly to where the red flowers were. And that's what they did. And they flew together. And they were really, Hector was rather surprised at first that he could fly as fast as this big bird. And they kept up and they flew through the sky. And on the way, Penda told, yes?
Did you use Sharpie for that?
Yeah, well, yes, I did. Is that how you do your drawings?
No, not too much.
Yeah. Well, I like to use Sharpies and sometimes paint and sometimes colors. I like to use a lot of different
I
things.
can't tell what you used for the notebook on that cover right there.
Yeah, you can't tell?
No.
Well, I'm not sure
Is it
exactly.
paint?
Pardon?
Is that paint?
No, I don't think I used any paint here. I think just used markers mostly.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I know you've used a marker for the parrot and the hummingbird and the words
Yeah,
and the cage and the notebook.
all of that. All of that. Those are my illustrations. So
and
anyway.
the paper is just paper.
And then the paper. Yeah, this paper's paper. Okay, you got it. All right. So they're flying along, and while they're flying, Penda was telling Hector all of the things that she had learned about hummingbirds by listening to the ornithologist, like hummingbirds can fly 500 miles without stopping.
I don't even know what this
Their wings flap 200 times a second, and they only weigh about as much as a nickel. But also, they have really big hearts and really big brains for their size. And those are the things that Penda told Hector as they were flying to the flowers. And eventually they got to the flowers. And Hector loved the red flowers, and Penda chomped on the greens. And they had a good time. And while they were there, Penda remembered another thing that she had learned about hummingbirds. And that's that hummingbirds can fly up 100 feet into the air, and then they can dive at 60 miles an hour and then swoop up. And so when Penda reminded Hector of that, he said, "That's right, I can go up 100 feet, and then I come down at 60 miles an hour, and then I swoop back up." And he showed her how that worked. Sort of, but you have to go up, and then you come down, and then you go up again. And when Penda saw that, Penda said, "I want to try that." So Hector wasn't so sure that was a good idea, but Penda went up anyway, and she flew up as high as she could go, not 100 feet, but she went as high as she could go. And then she dove back down, and before she hit the ground, she tried to swoop up, and she didn't, and she crashed. Plopped right on the ground and knocked herself out. Yeah. Well, remember we said the hummingbird has a really big heart, so Hector's not going to leave her there injured. So he knew he had to help, but he also has a big brain. He had to figure out, how am I going to do that? And the first thing he noticed was this big black cat that looked like it might harm Penda. So first thing he did was to, again, fly up 100 feet, down 60 miles an hour, and chase the cat away. And then he realized, then he needed to let the ornithologist know that Penda needed help. So he took one of her feathers and flew back to the ornithologist and dropped it at her feet, so she knew that there was a problem and she needed to come and help. And so she did. She went and she rescued Penda and brought her safely back to her cage. And there they were. And it looks like maybe they had become friends, because Penda showed Hector where those beautiful red flowers were, and Hector showed her how to do the up and down dive, even though she needed to practice a little bit. But it looked like maybe they were friends. So Hector dropped one of his red feathers on the floor of the cage and grabbed one of Penda's and took it to fly away back to the red flowers. And, you know, it's kind of like that sometimes, isn't it? There's that big word, vulnerability, that sometimes we just need to be vulnerable. We need to open up and see if that person could be our friend. And like it seemed to happen, Penda and Hector became friends, just like Rosa and Boone. And we can too, if we trust ourselves to listen to somebody and get to know them and become friends. It's possible. So that's my story. And I have a copy of that book in my bag here, along with those other books that Twinks talked about. And I'd like to give them to the Sunday school library. So if I could hand this off to somebody that would take those down there for me, would you do that for me? Thank you. Well, you could follow these folks and they can show you. Somebody know? Anybody know?
Deb will tell you where the library is, okay?
Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you so much. Will you join me in a moment of prayer or meditation? Spirit of light and love, thank you for this morning. Thank you for the celebration of Nancy, an elder in our congregation, and the wisdom that comes to us from all of our elders. And we thank you for Eleanor, the newest member of our congregation, and the wisdom that comes to us from our children and youth. We thank you for this moment together, that we may be open to a little bit of vulnerability together, that we can dance and laugh and play together, but also that we can hold each other's pain and fear and frustration together. And we just thank you for this community and for the work that we all do together. Blessed be.
To Risk, a poem by William Arthur Ward. To laugh is to risk appearing a fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out to another is to risk involvement. To expose feelings is to risk exposing your true self. To place your ideas and dreams before a crowd is to risk their loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. But risks must be taken, because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. They may avoid suffering and sorrow, but they cannot learn, feel, change, grow, or live.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join. The insert has the words to I am willing. I
Each week, we have the practice of splitting our offertory plate. Half of what is collected goes to the work of First Parish Brewster, and the other half goes to a worthy organization nominated by members of this congregation. Today's split plate is with the Cape Cod Cape Verdean Museum and Cultural Center. This organization is housed in the historic Emerald House, a museum of artifacts highlighting the Cape Verdean and other Lusophone migrations. The Museum and Cultural Center sponsors a variety of community events, including celebrations of Cape Verdean culture, history, art, and music, and seminars or workshops on farming practices, music, quilting, and language. There are several ways you can give today. You can text to give, the number is in your order of service, or you can donate on our website, or you can make out a check to FPBUU. Please note split plate in the memo line. However you choose to give today, thank you for your generosity. The offering will now be gratefully received.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circled round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrived. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circled round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now,
Thank you. That was beautiful. Can we just take a minute to appreciate Kaiza and the music right now in this time? Clatter. It is a great time to be here for music. Thank you. This reading, it's not actually called Words by Howard Thurman, it's just Words by Howard Thurman, so just want to clarify that. There's something in you that waits and listens for the sound of genuine in other people. And if you can't hear it, then you're reduced by that much. If I were to ask you, what is the thing that you desire most in life? You would say a lot of things off the top of your head. Most of which you wouldn't believe, but you would think that what you were saying, the things that I thought you ought to think, that you think you should say. But I think that if you were stripped to whatever there is in you that is literal, and you tried to answer that question, the answer may be something like this. I want to feel like I am thoroughly and completely understood, so that now and then I can take my guard down and look out around me and not feel like I will be destroyed with my defenses down. I want to feel completely vulnerable, completely naked, completely exposed, and absolutely secure. So who's ready to get vulnerable together? I mean, we already made you dance to a Disney song, so I don't know how much more vulnerable we could get. But I'm actually surprised that anyone turned up with a service title like that, because I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of being vulnerable. And I'm sure it's not high on the list of things you want to do on a Sunday afternoon or morning. But here we are. You showed up, I showed up, and so we're going to go there together. Today is day 17 of Lent. And if you've been around for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Lent. Not so much the giving up something in penance, but this period of springtime and reflection. My Lenten practice is to add something to my life, enhance my life at this time in some way. Last year, I was all about wearing colorful clothes each day of Lent, because I was pretty much stuck in this pattern of just wearing black clothes before that, mostly because society tells people black clothes are slimming. Over the years, I've done various things, and this year, I was pretty sure I knew what I was going to do for Lent. But at the same time, I had this service on the horizon, and I knew I wanted to talk about vulnerability, as it's the theme of the month for the larger UU world. And it's a complicated, meaty subject, and I really enjoy the process of getting lost in worship research, reading, reflecting, questioning myself and my own beliefs. And in true Lenten revelation, as I dove headfirst into the wonderful world of vulnerability, I realized that last year I had used Lent as a cover-up, and that I was about to do the same thing again. This is probably not how Jesus intended it to go, but I found peace with that, and hopefully with the divine spirit of things too. When we hear the word vulnerable, we often conjure up images of baby rabbits, maybe babies, sick folks, elders, maybe our own child selves in a distant past when we were being bullied or felt unsafe in some way. But if you take a look at the front of your order of service, you will see 4 different types of beautiful vulnerability. The first picture is Claudia, one of our amazing childcare providers. And if you know babies and toddlers, you know how trusting they have to be vulnerable enough to fall asleep in someone's arms. I love that we have Claudia and Danny caring for the littlest members of our community, and I love that they fall asleep in their arms because they know they are safe and loved here. The next picture is folks in a class Kaiza and I ran this week. that pushed us beyond our comfort levels into dancing and art, including finger painting. It was such a beautiful evening of shared richness and folks willing to be vulnerable with each other as we moved our bodies and created together. The third picture is a 15-year-old at the funeral of my fish, Justin Beta. For context, Justin was a $3 fish that over his lifetime had 4 different habitats, a rolling selection of gourmet fish treats. There was the period where I was attempting to train him. He had a hammock, a whole good morning ritual. He was more than a fish to me. And this is a picture of the teen who set up his headstone and participated in a fish funeral for a fish that had been in our freezer for a couple of weeks till I got over COVID. And that's beautiful vulnerability for a 15-year-old boy. And lastly, this is the official team photo for the PMC ride that I am doing with Liz Libby in August. We are riding for the amazing Laura Gill and my dear friend Jackie, both of who have had breast cancer this year. And to so publicly say, as someone who lives in a fat body, that I am taking on this challenge of a 77-mile bike ride, which is 10 miles past Boston from this spot, here this summer, with not an insignificant chance of failure, feels more than a little vulnerable. But more on that later. We don't often think about being vulnerable as times when we are powerful and strong and courageous, and yet I would argue that in vulnerability comes power, strength, beauty, and aliveness. And without it, who are we? I do want to pause here and really lift up that I am talking about all of this from the eyes of a white, cisgendered queer woman living in a state that is globally safe for me. I acknowledge that for many of our Black, brown, Native, immigrant, and transgender siblings, and right now particularly our transgender children and youth, embracing the fullness of their vulnerabilities is a very different situation. Dr. Jen Jackson says, the cost of courage for a Black person in America is high because we are trying to find the courage to speak out against racism, the courage to protest the killings of innocent Black people, and the courage to fight for equality in a country that literally hates our existence. Taking the risk of calculated vulnerability, whatever that is for you, we all have our own insecurities and stories, is probably one of the most important acts of faith we can make. Brené Brown says, faith minus vulnerability and mystery equals extremism. If you've got all the answers, then don't call what you do faith. Because what we know to be true is no one is unique in their pain, no one is unique in the things that cause them grief, and no one is unique in the hard parts of life. Taking the risk to be vulnerable, to crack open, can allow others to crack open in their own hardened exterior, letting down their defenses and creating connection. In a sermon shared by Reverend Johnson, they shared their story of Antoinette Tuff. Who's heard of Antoinette Tuff? Antoinette, a bookkeeper at a school outside of Atlanta, told the emergency dispatcher that 20-year-old Michael Hill, standing in front of her with an assault rifle, wanted the police to back off, but that he didn't really want to shoot the children. In 25 minutes on the phone with 911, she also commiserated with Michael. She saw his vulnerability when he confessed he had nothing to live for, and she relayed her own experience of attempting suicide. Let's see, she said, if we can work it out so that you don't have to go away with them for a long time. Here was a young man with a gun. Ms. Tuff was utterly vulnerable, but she saw his vulnerability too. She recognized his humanity and exposed her own. So finally, he laid down his gun, and she said, "It's going to be all right, sweetheart. I just want you to know that I love you. And I am proud of you. And that's a good thing that you're just giving up. Don't worry about it. We all go through something in life." As the police rushed in, she defended him, saying, "All he's got is his phone." This story did make the news, but not to the extent of stories of gunmen who end up killing. This story of risk and courage and vulnerability is more instructive than the stories that end up in carnage and destruction. It teaches us that even if real weapons are drawn, shared humanity can keep us safe. I believe so much of what happens in our world, where communication breaks down from arguments with family through wars breaking out, comes down to, at the core, our aversion to being vulnerable with each other, which is really an aversion to be seen at our primal core of self, where all of our rawness, our fragility, and our perceived weaknesses are laid out for all to see. And yet, as Rev Weber says, to be seen, to be heard, is the thing we want more than anything in the world. But because so many experience criticism, dismissal, or invalidation, the moment we brave our voice, our art, our vulnerability into the open, we learn to be silent, to be covered, and to be small. After a while, we get so used to keeping our inner life a secret that we become distant even from ourselves. If we're able to get honest with each other, if we're able to be in conflict and look each other in the eye and say, "I'm feeling vulnerable," rather than, "You're making me mad," there is much more room for connection and healing. Imagine this beloved community disarming each other's anger and frustrations and disappointments, all things that are part and parcel of community life, with vulnerability. What if instead of investing in parking lot frustrations over whatever church business has aggravated us, why don't we try and say, "As I age, I feel worried about the future of this church, and that decision is making me anxious"? What if we open ourselves to vulnerability to care for each other in an even deeper way than we do? What if we say, "Yes, I'd love some soup," to the person offering to bring you soup when you have COVID, instead of, "I'm fine," just because you know you can drag your weary carcass to the microwave, so you don't need soup, and God forbid anyone thinks you can't care for yourself. Why not try and say, "Yes, I'd love some soup," and accept the love? Because if you say yes, then you're giving others the opportunity to say yes to the love they need. Please take the risk to be loved by this community. Have the courage to be held by this faith. I did, and it saved my life. And so back to the PMC and living in a fat body and Lent. Last week, Claire Carl, our visiting worship leader, sent a bio that was read at the start of worship. It went, "Claire Carl is a force of nature. We love that." They're a fifth-generation Germanic settler to eastern Massachusetts. People were nodding, cool, very cool, and identify as white, middle-class, non-binary. We were all still with them. We were kind of trying to remember what non-binary meant, but we were like, "Yep, good." And then the next descriptor was small fat. And I'll tell you, as a fat woman in this sanctuary, the change of atmosphere was instant. Mumbling, kind of uncomfortableness. I heard someone say, "Don't say that about yourself." And I'm not saying this to shame, not at all, but as a framing for my story. And as much as I can't talk for all Scottish people, except on the subject of the movie Braveheart, which is not accurate, we are all unified on that, all of us. I can't talk for every fat person's experience, but for me, seeing an awesome preacher or anyone in a role I admire, identifying as being in the fat body they are. It's one of the most beautifully affirming things. It normalizes this word that causes such discomfort and unease in us. I've always lived in a fat body. It's not new to me. And I've chosen career paths and hobbies and lived a lifestyle that was not meant for fat people, supposedly. I was an outdoor educator for a decade, a farmer. I led downhill ski trips for teenagers in this body. I love swimming and fake lifeguarding, but you don't see a picture of my body type ever doing any of these things, ever. And it has just never been a thing for me. Those were my passions. And through a combination of being raised by parents who performed the opposite perceived gender roles, and being the sibling of an autistic sister who calls life as it is, I think there must have been something about growing up around that level of unfiltered honesty, which defied every social norm, that changed my neurological pathways or something, I don't know. Because those are the things I have pursued without questioning it in my fat body. Until about 5 years ago, when I had a tumor removed from my pancreas and a never-ending cycle of complications that lasted about 3 years. And I really disconnected from my body in that time because I felt so judged by folks, like there was this inevitability that I would end up with a tumor or pancreas problems because of my body size. I only have 3/4 of a pancreas now, and I lost 2 other organs along the way, and my blood sugar is just fine, y'all. And even if it wasn't the case, more and more the medical understanding of obesity is evolving, and frankly, the prejudice around fatness and disease needs to be challenged and stopped. Amen. However, this outside of me fear and judgment and yuckiness sunk in a way that had never before in my life. And I'd let people's opinions and judgment of my body get to me. And with judgment for me comes shame, and with shame comes like this smaller, quieter, fearful me, the less vulnerable me, and at a time in my life when I was probably the most vulnerable I'd ever been. And I also really wanted to be seen, as we all do. And as I recovered physically, Lent rolled around, and I realized now I was using last year's Lent kind of as an excuse to be vulnerable. Almost like I can wear colors and be my bold, bright, extra me that I am, but if I couch it in Lent somehow, that will take the edge off the vulnerability, and it did. And what a blessing that was in some ways, even though it was sort of a cover-up for my newly formed insecurity. And as I've worked through, and still continue to work through, why our society has such a hard time using fat as a morally neutral descriptor, I get to once again be the me who loves to push the boundaries of expectations and challenge the cultural norm of my body type. And by doing the PMC and all of the public faceness of that, the fundraising challenge, the actual ride, in this body, and to feel embodied and alive again is such a gift. And my prayer today is that by risking and being seen riding in a bike in a mass of straight-sized bikers and living my full, vulnerable, authentic self more and more, those who are silenced or shut down with the same insecurities and judgments that I was during my sickness can crack open and find the courage and love and live a life of possibility that does not exist without the willingness to be vulnerable. Not exist without the willingness to be vulnerable. Make us weak or exposed, it opens our eyes. We become able to see that others hide their pain and their fear too. And with that, we become whole. All of us connected, all of us aware how much compassion is needed, even when the other's pain is not easy to see. It's all about understanding that vulnerability isn't a weakness. but a softer form of strength. And using that strength to hold each other up. Over here so that the microphone.
Yes.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. You won't let you lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load if you just call me. Lean on me when you're not strong.
Someone with rhythm can clap and we'll all follow.
I'll help you
Thank you. As we go, may we remember that we were never meant to make it through this life alone. Vulnerability is a doorway, friends. Those wounded and tender pieces of ourselves help us return to each other. What seems wounded or unworthy when shared becomes our strength. Do not deny each other that gift. Blessed be and amen.